Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 197 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions, your one-stop shop for all services related to FCPA Compliance and Ethics programs. Today I have Jerod Morris. Jerod is the Vice President of the Rainmaker Digital FM platform. I've known Jerod for several years, although not in his current role. I have previously met him through Corporate Compliance Insight. And Jerod has worked at a variety of jobs relating to Copy Blogger and now with the Rainmaker platform. And he's going to talk to us today about how to have a remarkable audience experience. Jerod podcasts several times a week, and I think he's got some really interesting thoughts about how a compliance officer can have a remarkable audience experience for your clients. The episode comes in at just over 24 minutes. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today, I think you're in for a real treat because I have with me Jerod Morris. Jerod is the VP of Rainmaker FM at Copy Blogger. He is a podcaster extraordinaire, has at least two shows I know of, the Showrunner, and then he has a podcast on Indiana basketball. Interestingly, I have known Jerod in the compliance space where we first met several years back just to show how we're all related. And he was part of the initial team that helped put together the Corporate Compliance Insights website for Maurice Gilbert. And to even tie it all together in a circle, Jerod, this week I'm doing a series of blog posts based upon a podcast interview I did with Maurice, or a series of podcasts. Wow. Yeah. So with that cool. Long-winded introduction, Jerod, welcome, and thank you for taking time from your summer work schedule and holiday schedule to visit with me.
Oh, for sure. No, thank you. This is going to be a real pleasure. I love talking with you. I love talking about podcasting, and I have to imagine that Maurice was a great podcast guest.
He was. He was.
Yeah. No surprise.
Jerod and his company, Rainmaker FM, put together a fabulous platform for podcasters like myself. And Jerod, one of Jerod's roles is to help educate both the podcast community and, frankly, I've tried to explain a much broader community, and part of that's the compliance community. I had the privilege to hear Jerod speak at Podcast Movement 2015, where he gave some thoughts on what he called the 4 elements of a remarkable audience experience. And, of course, it was focused on podcasters and podcasting, but I found it just incredibly relevant to a chief compliance officer or a compliance practitioner. So, Jerod, I was wondering if you could talk to us about the 4 elements of a remarkable audience experience and then how we might tie that to internal corporate communications and marketing.
Sure. No, I'd love to, and I appreciate your kind words about the presentation. That was a great event, and I love giving that presentation, in part because I always talk with people afterwards who get excited and get enthusiastic about it. And the reason, I think, is because it really, hints at something larger. And that's the idea that we've been trying to get across to folks with the Showrunner is, don't just think of yourselves as a podcaster who you're just creating audio episodes. You really are trying to create an experience for an audience, take people on a journey. And I think, the 4 essential elements really break down the components of what it takes to do that. And I think the big strength of a podcast is the ability that it gives you to create an authentic connection with an audience. And so authenticity is the first of the 4 essential elements. And authenticity really boils down to knowing yourself, knowing your audience, and then understanding the intersection between the two. So I think, to create an authentic connection with anybody, first, you have to know what you bring to the table, what knowledge, what experience you have, what your passions are. But I think sometimes people really mistake authenticity and transparency, and they think that being transparent, just putting anything out there is going to create a connection. But that's not true. If you're transparent about the wrong things, you will waste people's time. And so what's very important with authenticity is the same thing that's important in communication, in listening, and that's empathy. Really understanding what you have to share for this other person, be it someone that you're talking to, an audience member, whoever it may be. How can what you know and what you're passionate about further them, move them along closer to some goal? And so that intersection is what helps you create an authentic connection. Now, the next step is usefulness. That's the second essential element of a remarkable audience experience. And that means that people are investing time in whether it's a show that you're producing, a conversation that they're in, and you want to make sure that that investment pays off, that it's useful in some way. And there are typically three elements, especially when we talk about content, which are entertainment, education, or inspiration. And what people often overlook is that an audience member is coming to you, for the most part, for one of those over the other. So I know that when people are coming to listen to the Showrunner, they'd love to be entertained, and I think they like the fact that we try and inspire people to get out and start their own shows, but really they want to be educated, right? People are coming to us to learn about, the craft of podcasting. And so we've got to make sure that, yes, we want to do all three of the elements if we can, but we've got to understand the number one thing people are coming to us for and make sure we give them that above all else. So those are the first two elements, authenticity, usefulness, and then we get to sustainability, which is the easiest one to explain, the hardest one to actually do, because it's quite simple. It just means show up reliably, and show up reliably over time, because you can be building an authentic connection, and it can be useful, but if you're only there every now and then, if people expect you to be there and you're not there, or heaven forbid, if you just don't even start in the first place, you can't really create anything remarkable, because a true remarkable experience, whether it's in content or any type of relationship, requires time. It requires trust. And the only way to do that is just to keep showing up, to make a commitment to an audience, and then fulfill that commitment so you continue to build trust. And that's this idea of sustainability. So we've got authenticity, usefulness, sustainability, and then the final one is profitability. And that basically, we talk about profitability, and immediately we think monetary, and that is important, because anything that we're doing, if it's not paying off in some way, we're not going to be able to do that long term. But I also think there's an expanded idea of profitability that involves more than money. It involves the experience. It involves us getting more out of the experience than we're putting into it intrinsically, and in the same way, our audience getting more out of the experience. And so all of those together, authenticity, usefulness, sustainability, profitability, they converge to create a remarkable audience experience, whether it's in person, you're planning an event, whether it's a party that you're having at your house, or whether it's a podcast that you're trying to create an experience over time with. I think you can apply those elements to really any of those.
Jerod, one of the things that has struck me, I've heard you make this presentation live. I've heard you make this presentation on the Showrunner Podcast. And one of the things that struck me is, particularly with authenticity and usefulness, and a little as also to sustainability, is it's not one step, two steps, three steps. It's one step with another step, and then synthesizing the best of both steps. So, for instance, around authenticity, you have know yourself and know your audience, but those are only parts of the equation. You have to synthesize that down to find the intersection. But where you really drove it home for me was on usefulness. And you were really passionate about this in your podcast with Johnny, where you talked about educating and you talked about entertaining. But where you really make your mark or make a difference is the inspiration, where you can take an important subject, you can entertain somebody, yet even more important, at least the way you explained it, was inspiring someone to either take action, to take a message, to take something away from the presentation. Did I get that right, or a different direction?
Yeah, no, you did. I mean, that's, usefulness is an interesting one, because I think the best shows, the best audience experiences will inevitably educate, entertain, and inspire. And that's the goal, if you want to do all three of them. And certainly with the Showrunner, the inspiration part is really big for us, because Johnny and I both are really passionate about podcasting and what it's done for us. And one of the main reasons that we wanted to start that show was to pass that on. But it's just, I think, when you I think it's important with usefulness, again, the thing people overlook, and I think sometimes if we get too caught up in the inspiration with the showrunner, for example, if we just come in there and give pep talks, but don't give people actual tools they can use to go do it, then we won't be inspiring for very long because we won't be combining it with the education. And so I do think that it is important that everybody know, depending on what your show is or whatever audience experience you're looking to create, it comes back to the empathy, and this is where the authenticity, that comes first, and then the usefulness comes. I think that empathy is important to know what your audience really needs. Make sure that's the foundation, and if your foundation is education, well, now be as entertaining and inspiring as you can, but never forget the foundation of what your content needs to be built on. For us, that's education. For This American Life, for example, it's entertainment, and I think you just got to know what that is. Know what your audience's expectations are. Make sure you match and exceed. Don't ever fall short of it.
And when you've ended your presentation, you talk about what you call the USP, or unique show positioning. What is that?
So the unique show positioning is basically what makes you different. And I think especially in anything that involves content, and that involves content online, there are so many options now for people. And really, it's not just with online content. I mean, anybody who's creating any type of experience, we're all competing with television, with recreation, with music, with all the other things people could be doing, but we're asking them to invest their time in us and into what we're doing. And there's so much out there that is alike. There's so many options that to cut through the noise, it's really important to be different. Sally Hogshead often says, what makes us different, different is better than better, right?
Right.
And so the unique show positioning is really understanding the audience that you're going for, understanding the other options that they have, and making sure that you uniquely position yourself to stand out, to get the attention in the first place, so that way the audience has a chance to experience you and then judge you based on your merit. But if there's nothing unique about you, if you're not positioned in a different way, then it's going to be very hard for you to get the attention in the first place. So, and people miss that, and it's not really, the reason I break it out as its own, kind of, there at the end is because it's kind of weaved into all the elements, but so much that it can be missed. And it's one of those, you can be authentic, you can be useful, you can be sustainable and profitable, but that missing link, if you're not different, that may be the reason why you're struggling to make the connection that you need to make. And so especially early, I really stress for anybody who's taking on any type of content project, be different, stand out, get that attention, so that way your content can then be judged based on its merit, not simply overlooked.
You attended, if we could change the focus just a little bit, to your other podcast, The Lead.
Yeah.
Jerod is a Indiana Hoosier, and I think 4 years ago, if I've got this right, you started a post-game, and of course a basketball game, podcast. Mm-hmm. You and some of your cohorts break down each game almost immediately after the game. So, and whenever you talk about it, just the passion comes through. So tell us about how you guys started that and then what it's really coalesced into for you all.
Yeah, that show is called The Assembly Call, and I will say, I certainly hope when I talk about it that I get passionate, because it's the kind of show, it's the kind of project that if we didn't have passion for it, there's no way we would keep doing it, because the schedule is pretty arduous, and we didn't really realize what the schedule would be when we started it. It was 4 years ago, and I knew that I wanted to do something about Indiana basketball, because I grew up loving IU basketball. I have a lot to say, and living away from Bloomington and really not, having people around here in Dallas at that time that I could watch games with, I always found myself at the end of a game wanting more. And I would go, and obviously there's the official post-game show, but I wanted interaction with fans. And it's interesting, we kind of understood unique show positioning before I ever really could verbalize that. I wasn't, I didn't know that concept. But that's what we wanted to do with the Assembly Call. We said there's lots of other IU shows and IU blogs out there, there's no other show that goes live as soon as the game is over and it's fans breaking down the game. You know, so it's not the IU media person that has to kind of be politically correct and interview the coach and you get coach speak. It's fans breaking down the game, disappointed when we lose, excited when we win, and the show kind of rides those emotional roller coasters. And so we launched it, had no real plan for how long it would go or what we would keep doing, and we just found that we genuinely loved creating the content. We weren't making any money off of it. I mean, to this day, we've made a few $100s off of some affiliate links, but we've just kept doing it because we love doing it, and that's carried us through to the point where actually at the end of last season, people started coming to us and saying, why aren't you monetizing this? Why isn't there a button for us to support you? Like, let us give you money because we don't want the show to ever go away. And to me, it's just always been such a testament to the importance of intrinsic profitability, which is, you know, you just as a content creator getting more out of the experience than you put into it. And for us, we always have, because we just have a genuine love for the content, which also goes back to the first element of authenticity, of really knowing yourself. It's a topic we love, we have something to add, and we've just stuck with it. And over time, trust has built and authority has built, and now we have a great audience with us. And now it just keeps growing and keeps building momentum, and I'm already excited for the new season to start.
Let me see if I could pick up on a couple of things you said through there, really from the compliance practitioner angle.
Yeah.
It sounded like, first of all, you had a need, which was to share your passion for Indiana basketball with people in Dallas, people around you, which was not being fulfilled at that time. And so you reached out to some friends to be able to share that enthusiasm. And it was really that passion you had for Indiana basketball and lacking, you know, that collegial atmosphere that was not available to you in Dallas that led to the creation. But you've been able to share that passion with an audience. And did you find that there was really an audience out there like yourself that were really not that you guys were passionate, but that you weren't able to share that passion?
Oh, we definitely did. And that has really been, you know, I will admit that after every season, except for the last one, I've questioned doing the show again because it gets hard, you know, after every game doing it and keeping up with building the audience and all of that. What always kept me going in those moments where I was like, okay, I just don't know if I can invest the time in this, is an email that we would get for someone stationed overseas in the military, or an email from someone who lives in Brazil. You know, people that went to Indiana, no longer are close, and basically they said they can't even watch the games live, but they know they can tune into our show to feel that community, the atmosphere, to stay connected with something special for them. And we were the conduit for that. And so, I don't know that it surprised me. I thought there might be people out there, but it still is exciting every single time we get an email like that because it just shows that we tapped into something that was out there and that was bigger than we were, and we just happened to be the ones who put the first step forward to start putting the content out there and to give people a place to rally. But you know, again, it was born of our passion, but then we found that there were a lot of other people out there who had kind of those same thoughts and the same longings in a sense that we did.
Jerod, unfortunately, we're getting near the end of our time, but I was wondering if you might describe the Showrunner Podcast a little bit for listeners who might want to check that out. You did a great job on the assembly call, but tell us about the Showrunner Podcast, Johnny's role, your role, how you guys kind of go about putting that together.
Sure. You know, the Showrunner Podcast, the most simple description of it is that it's a podcast about podcasting, but we work very hard to try and make it more than that. We want it to be a show that, number one, inspires current and potential podcasters to see themselves as something bigger, to see themselves as showrunners in charge, responsible for an audience experience. And our goal with the show, with each episode, is in some way to have it contribute to a step-by-step process for how to develop, launch, and run a successful show. And so where our show differs from a lot of podcasts that deal with podcasting is we don't really get too bogged down in the technical stuff. So if you're looking for reviews of microphones and that kind of thing, we won't be the show for you. But if you want to learn about connecting with an audience and building an audience that leads to something bigger, and how to do an interview, and how to craft your content, and how to deliver that great experience, that's what the Showrunner is. And Johnny Master is my co-host. He also hosts Hack the Entrepreneur. And I think he and I both have some varied experiences. We have differing philosophies on certain elements of podcasting, which I think helps to make it, a rich experience for a listener, because it's, you get different perspectives on it. But I think our overall idea of what the show is, which is really empowering podcasters to see themselves as something more and giving them the tools to do it, we both feel very similarly on that, and I hope that's what comes across in the show.
Maybe I should have started that question with, why don't you tell us what a showrunner is? Because you went into really great detail the first episode to explain what a showrunner is, and then from there, I thought a lot of the show flowed. So why don't you tell my audience what a showrunner is?
Sure. So a showrunner is the person who is responsible for an audience experience. And it's a term that started in television, and I think that's still where most people, the context within which most people think of the term. So like Vince Gilligan is the showrunner of Breaking Bad. But we love that term because just like Vince Gilligan was the person responsible for the experience of viewers on Breaking Bad, that's how Johnny and I feel when it comes to the showrunner. And that's how Andy Ryan and I feel when it comes to the assembly call. And we think that everybody, whether you're planning an event, whether you're starting a podcast, whether you're putting together a blog, whatever it is, instead of thinking of it as just another blog post or, you're just putting together audio files and you're driving traffic and you're doing all of this, it's about delivering a remarkable experience over time that leads to something bigger. And that's what a showrunner is, and that's what we want people to see themselves as, no matter if they're starting a podcast or whatever content they're creating.
Yeah, that's a great description. The Showrunner Podcast, I will tell folks, is available on iTunes, and that's how I listen to it. But is it available in any other places?
Sure. Yeah, people can get it on Stitcher. If you have an Android like I do, if you just search for Showrunner in whatever your preferred podcast app is, you should be able to find it there. And actually, if you can't, let me know, Jerod@profitability.com, because I'd love to get it in there. But I think it's available most places. And then, of course, you can go to Rainmaker FM and then see the Showrunner and all of the other shows that we have on our network.
And there's a great group of shows on the Rainmaker network. They're all supported on the Rainmaker platform for listening to a podcast. It's incredibly useful, and Jerod and the folks at Rainmaker have developed a great platform, and I hope to be able to explore sort of the architecture of that just in terms of explaining how a compliance practitioner could think through problems on a later episode. So maybe I can save that one for later, Jerod, but I can't thank you enough for coming on. Could you, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, could they email you? And if so, what would your email be?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Jerod@copyblogger.com. Feel free to email me anytime. Any questions about podcasting, audience experiences, Indiana basketball, anything. I always love connecting with anybody who listens to anything that I have to say. So that'd be great.
Well, Jerod, thanks a lot. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Tom. This was great.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. I have a call to action for you. If you could go to iTunes and rate this podcast, it would certainly help. And also, I am developing a list of questions for our next mailbag episode. So please send me any questions you might want to have answered on a podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to visiting with you again.